If somebody comes to me and says, we're looking for, this kind of position, this is the sort of experience we need in it, we'll know pretty much straight away if that's going to be realistic or not. So you want to try and manage expectations. Nothing's ever impossible, but it's about understanding what are the non-negotiables, what things can you look past, what things can't you look past. So it might be level. They might not need somebody who's at manager level on 150k. They might be open to somebody who's on that upward curve, or somebody who's a specialist looking to move into that. Will they look at somebody 4 days a week? Will they look at somebody remotely? Will they look at somebody who is even overqualified? I'll always ask that question, because there's lots of people, especially what I find when you get to that kind of senior manager level of, and in retail or those sort of industries, maybe that's kind of 150 to 160, 170, 180. They don't necessarily want to go into those head of or director level positions. They're quite happy just kind of staying at that kind of level. They enjoy it. They don't want the extra pressure and stresses that come with it, but they find it really hard to get those jobs because they're deemed as overqualified, because they've got 20 years experience in the industry doing that kind of thing.
Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in. I'm jumping in here from the future to quickly introduce you to our guest, Russell Ayles. Russell is the founder and director of a talent acquisition company here in Australia, aka a recruitment company, and he's specialized in retail, fashion, and e-commerce. He has 2 decades of experience in recruitment and has helped some of the most iconic brands, including Ailes, General Pants, to find exceptional talents across the globe. His journey in recruitment began, like many, by chance. So over the years, what he has done is build a reputation for really reshaping the recruitment process, emphasizing genuine collaboration and deep understanding of both the client needs and the candidate's needs. And his agency is only 2 years old, but it's known for going above and beyond traditional methods, focusing on the right fit rather than quick fixes. He mentioned in the chat right at the beginning that he's changing the name of his company to better reflect his ethos and his philosophy about recruitment, and I found that insight really fascinating in his quest to always improve and have, a better match between what he believes in and his business look and feel. He has great posts on LinkedIn. He's always, collaborating and helping both other recruiters and job candidates to perform better. And in this episode, I think you're going to listen to that. You're going to see all that great experience showcased in the way that he talks about recruitment, how excited and passionate he is. And I hope that it helps you understand recruiters better and build those great relationships with recruiters that really help your career in the future. I believe this episode is essential for those who are in Russell's area of expertise and adjacent areas, even like advertising, design, FMCG, but also for anyone who is keen on transitioning from industry to industry, even if they are not the industries that you want to transition to. We do talk about that topic as well. So without further ado, let's hear from Russell, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Bye. I feel like I know you. That's that parasympathetic relationship. Is that what they call it? When we talk to people we've never met, but we've been sort of observing them on social media. And you have such a great style of posting on LinkedIn, and you do so well with your posts. I just wanted to start by saying I really, really love what you do on LinkedIn and how you present yourself. I think it's great, Russell.
Thanks. I hate it. I hate posting.
Do you? Yeah. Why do you hate it?
I just feel the pressure there to do it. It's not. And you know what? And it's weird. And like being like a like a LinkedIn top voice. I think that gives an extra pressure. You kind of like, well, I have to post, and also if I don't post, are they gonna, are they just gonna suddenly sort of change their mind? And I'm thinking, well, why should I care if they change their mind and take it away? It doesn't mean anything. And I'm like, yeah, but it's quite nice actually. So you just kind of, you just put pressure on yourself, and it's just fine.
Does it bring you business? Do you do it because of it brings you business?
I don't really know, because it's a little bit. It's a little bit soft to kind of tell, because there might be people that would have conversations with me because it's a bit of a warmer kind of conversation because they might have seen my posts, but I don't do it for business really. I just I do it because I want to kind of just try and maintain some kind of just some kind of presence, I guess. You know, I don't think it does any harm. You know, I don't think it's brought me in loads of business. Well, saying that, there was one business I worked with recently, and I'm pretty sure she had seen my LinkedIn posts, and I just we just placed a couple of people with them. It's like a kind of home renovation startup business that does tiles. So to be fair, we just that was that's quite a bit of money from them. So yeah, I guess there has been some, but I think it just takes time. I think for me it's more as much as I've been here kind of 4 or 5 years, is still trying to kind of establish myself in the Australian market, because it's I'm relatively unknown. You know, all my experience previously has been in the UK, so it's
I think your LinkedIn helps a lot. You know, you have such a strong, unique voice. You know, it's very yours. It's not like anybody else's. I really like the way that you post. I thought it was going to bring you way more business. Where is your pipeline coming from? How do you get clients?
Just mainly sort of just your traditional business development that you get from, you're doing recruitment, cold calling, cold outreach via LinkedIn. You know, look, it's not to say maybe it has brought me more business than I know. I think it's more of a case of, I just don't really know. I don't ask people, have you seen my stuff on LinkedIn? I don't really, I think that sounds a bit funny. So maybe it has done, but no, just sort of regular kind of cold outreach and just forming relationships. You know, I work with, the clients that we work with we don't work with everyone, but the people we work with, we work with on a regular basis. So it's just it's been 2 years now doing this, and I've proven to myself that I can run a one-man business and I can support myself and everyone else. And now it's kind of the next step is trying to build something. So hopefully next year that'll be time for that.
I think the way that I would explain it is like the consistency of your professional branding. So the LinkedIn posts that you do are very professional and align with the work that you do. Then people hop on your website, and your website is great, by the way. I love your website. And, it doesn't look like it's from a one-man's business. It looks, like a bigger outfit than that, because you chose well the design, and it just looks so professional. And then you look at on your website specifically, there's a list of clients that you've worked for, all the sort of big retailers, big names people would recognize. So that just reinforces at every point that people can trust you with their jobs.
I'm glad you like the website. I'm actually I'm just about to rebrand completely.
Are you?
Yeah, completely new business name and website. Yeah.
Right. So you're not going to be called Unrivaled anymore?
No, I hate it. I hate the name, actually.
Okay.
I liked it at first because it was about kind of, it was about I was trying to come up with something that gave an impression of, it's almost like we can't be beaten when it comes to like the service levels we give, the amount of experience and knowledge we bring. And it's just for the past year, every time I say it, I was calling from Unrivaled. It just hasn't felt right. So, I'm actually changing
your name? Can you tell us, or is it still embargoed?
I don't know. Is this part of the podcast, or is it just me and you chatting?
Oh, okay. Don't say it then. This podcast is going to go out in about 4 to 6 weeks. So if you're
it'll be out then. It's called Etisk. So Etisk. Etisk means it's Swedish for ethical. So basically, my full belief is that I don't believe recruitment is ethical, and that's not to say it's underhanded. That's not to say it's there's something kind of inherently wrong with it. But I just don't think people have kind of that ethical mindset at the heart of everything they do. There's too many companies that don't really care that they don't get back to candidates. There's too many recruitment agencies that make a point of not actually responding to applications, at the very least applications. And then just even the way that I think businesses vet the recruitment agencies that they use. Is working in retail. I've always found it really bizarre when. So as a retailer, you'll really vet your suppliers quite in depth. So you'll go and make sure that they're paying their employees well. There's no kind of slave labour or child labour, health and safety. In the warehouses and factories and everything in China, in Turkey, wherever it may be.
Yeah.
But then when you look at your human suppliers, your recruitment agencies, there's very little due diligence done by businesses. So to give you an example, and this is something that I just find bizarre as well. So I don't know if you know a guy called Steve Gard who runs the Circle Back initiative. So he runs an initiative where businesses can join this initiative, and also agencies, where you commit to responding to every application. So that's how it started, basically. Every business committing to respond to everybody who applies for a job. He also does kind of benchmarking now for sort of candidate experience and stuff like that. But so he has some big businesses on there, like Target, Kmart, not just retailers, they're just ones that spring to mind because they are retailers. So they're committing to responding to every single application, but then they use agencies that I know 100% have in their advert copy. Only successful candidates will be contacted. So you're saying, oh, look at us, look at us as a business. We promise to respond to everyone. We care so much, but we don't care enough to make sure our recruitment agencies are doing the same thing. So I just think there's a bit of a disconnect. So I wanted something that just sounded a bit different, that was a bit unique. I also wanted something that was a bit industry agnostic as well, because as much as I love retail, I love e-commerce, I love fashion. It's all I've done. In terms of the growth of the business, I don't believe what we do and the kind of clients we work with should remain just in that realm. There could be other industries that are very closely aligned, whether that's kind of digital agencies or things like that. That we can help. A lot of what we do is a lot of different positions that we recruit for can span different industries. So why just specifically work for retail and fashion businesses? So I wanted something that was agnostic and more of something that represented an ethos of how we operate. So I was looking at ethical. Obviously, I think the word ethical is pretty boring and overused. So I was looking at it in different languages basically, and I saw Etisk and I thought I like that. And then I'm just working with like a web and creative design agency now to kind of come up with, because what I'm conscious of is that I don't want Etisk being ethical. The word Etisk can come across quite boring. Everyone says oh, we're ethical, right. We do things the right way. So in terms of the branding, I'm going in the complete opposite direction. The branding is loud. It's almost kind of imagine kind of sort of urban, loud graffiti, that kind of bold colours. Yeah. And also the language we're going to be using is going to be kind of very direct. It's going to be along the lines of, don't be a dick, get back to people, do the right thing, rather than, we believe, rather than, it's kind of, pushing the boundaries of, I guess, what people would assume is, tradition, professionalism, just being kind of normal people, or just being, to the point, I guess.
I love it. As you were talking about this and the reason why you chose your new name, I started thinking about all of my clients that are in retail and have applied for jobs with, quote unquote, very ethical retailers in terms of their messaging to consumers. But we have experienced something very different in their recruitment processes. Exactly like you said. And that was so disappointing for the candidate because the brand is so high in equity, right? So you have that amazing brand awareness, amazing brand equity, but then the candidate's experience is not aligned with the brand. And I think that if you can bring that to the fold so that the career marketing is done in the same way as the customer marketing, I think that's really lovely and amazing. And I'm actually not sure if the recruitment process was a complete schmozzle because of culture or because of lack of understanding of how recruitment works. Because sometimes these brands grow from a little startup and become quite disjointed internally. So I remember us discussing it, and I can't say the names of the companies, but companies that are really sort of interesting from a consumer perspective that we opt into even paying a little bit more for the product because of the ethics behind it. But then the experience as a candidate looking for an executive role was terrible. And I have a feeling it's less about the culture internally and more about the fact that these people just started a company without a really strong background in HR and recruitment, and getting somebody like you to step in and support them just aligns the recruitment process with their ethos.
Yeah, I think, again, I find it weird how businesses will invest so much to make sure their tone of voice across every single channel is the same, is of high quality, is on brand, is speaking to the customers in the right way. So whether it's online, whether it's on social media, whether it's in store, but then it seems to kind of stop there. Why not continue that to the way you speak to your candidates, who are essentially customers? And I always butcher this this kind of story. So if anyone's listening to this, go and look it up. Just Google it. But if you look at Virgin Media in the UK, so they did a study. This was years ago. I say years ago, maybe 2016. I think, because I remember listening to it. I was at Recfest back in the UK in East London. It was, and there was they were telling the story about how they basically worked out that a poor customer experience was costing the business like £5-6 million a year, because they worked out that all these bad experiences that they got the data on it, so it's not just kind of something that they thought was happening. Like I said, I haven't got all the details, but they figured out the poor candidate experience was meaning not only they would cancel their Virgin contracts, but they would then tell at least 5 people who either wouldn't join the business or would cancel contracts, and there was this knock-on effect that was costing the company millions, and actually turned it round to make it something that made profit. So they gave such a good customer experience. They gave away during the process, they gave away sort of discounted sort of services with them to people, and friends and family discounts, and just by giving such a great experience, and then people using these discounts, and people sort of talking about what a great experience they had, they ended up actually making a business like £4 or £5 million. Like I said, I've completely butchered that story, but you can go and look it up, and there's lots of different websites that talk about it a bit more more sophisticated than I just did. But what it just goes to show is that the people that apply for your jobs are your customers, especially in retail. Yeah, not everyone's going to be a customer, but you can grow to love a company and be a customer. So one of my first in-house roles back in the UK in 2012 was with Mothercare. Now, I was, how old was I? Late 20s, maybe? No, 31. So I was 31. And I, at the time, had no children, didn't really have any interest in children. It was just, I was a 31-year-old kind of just, pretty happy with just what I was doing. And so I started working for Mothercare. Wasn't a customer, didn't really have an affinity with the product, but it was my first in-house role from agency, so it was something that I had to be quite open to. But by the end of working there over the sort of course of 2 years, I became incredibly proud to work for that business, because the kind of extent they went to make sure their product was like baby proof. They quadruple stitched items rather than sort of cheaper outlets that didn't do that. And I had immense pride. So I'd speak to people about it. I'd tell them that. I'd say, "Oh, did you know Mothercare? Yeah, it's a bit more expensive, but did you know they quadruple stitch all of the like the seams to make sure it's as soft as it can be for like the baby's skin and stuff like that." So I was almost like a brand ambassador, just because I was incredibly proud of working there. So even if you're not a customer and you have a great experience with a business, people will talk about it as well. So whether that is during the process or working for the business. So I just find it going back to that point, I just find it weird how they care so much about how they're talking to people on social media, talking to people, and the customer journey on the website, the experience in store, but then it kind of stops with that that candidate experience. Why isn't that aligned? You think about some of these big businesses must be getting I don't know tens of thousands of job applications each year. So let's say 30,000. Some big businesses, even if only half of them are customers, then there's still 15,000 people that you've got direct contact with that you can give a great experience, even if they're not relevant for your roles. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to talk to you about 2024. We're recording this in September 2024, late September, and just this week, earlier in this week, another recruiter called me to ask how my business was going because his business wasn't doing so well this year, and he wanted to get some feedback from me as a coach, and we had a bit of a chat about that. How is business going for you in 2024?
It's a bit of a funny one because I haven't got much to kind of compare it to because the business has been running for 2 years. I've only been in Australia, like I've only seen things during and post COVID. So I came here in 2019 in the July. So under a year later, where everyone's in lockdown and the economy's changed. So we're doing better than we did last year.
Okay.
But is that just because that was my first year last year?
Probably, yeah.
So, you would expect a bit of growth in that second year anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very similar to last year. I don't feel like it's anywhere. I don't feel like it's any better. If anything, I've probably relied on a smaller number of clients this year, but done more work with that smaller number of clients rather than last year. I probably had more clients, but again, that's been more of a conscious thing in terms of knowing. When you start doing any sort of business, but I think especially recruitment as an agency, it's very hard to turn business down. So even if you're working with a business that are not really aligned to your own values, or they work in a way that they might work very much just contingency, multi-agency.
Yeah.
You feel like kind of beggars can't be choosers. I'm new. In terms of. Yeah, I've got 20 years of recruitment experience, but in terms of my business, you get imposter syndrome. Like, I'm new, I need to prove my worth. I need to kind of, sort of say yes to everything. And I think you just suddenly, once you start kind of doing okay, you get a bit more confidence and you kind of think, well, actually, no, I don't want to work with these types of businesses anymore. I prefer working with these types of businesses. And so I'm working with a smaller number of clients, but it's just been a big learning curve over the past 2 years. I think just creating a business and kind of there's so many good things about it because I love working for myself. I could never work for somebody else again. I love being able to wait. I wake up and I might sit on my laptop at 7 o'clock in the morning and I feel good about that. Whereas if I worked for somebody and I felt like I had to do that, then I'd feel really, really shitty about that. So there's lots of good parts, being able to work when you want to work, but often that stretches into, working 12-hour days. You don't mind it because you feel like every hour you work, you're putting that into something, you're building something, but then also it's hard to switch off. I never switch off, even over the weekends. I have nights when I'm, laying there in bed thinking,
I know.
God, if people just stop using me or I lose a couple of clients, then what do I do? My wife's off on maternity leave at the moment. It's unpaid maternity leave, so she just gets the government standard. You're like, okay, so there's a bit of pressure on now as well. So there's lots of pressure, but it's kind of it's different pressure to working for another business. It's very up and down. But I think that's the nature of just recruitment. Full stop. Anyway, it can be kind of very, very up and down.
Yeah, that's true. I think for more established recruiters that have been operating for a long time, or the publicly listed recruitment companies, you can tell because they have to disclose it that 2024 hasn't been a good year for them. I work worldwide, so clients in the US are having a harder time in finding jobs. Clients in the UK as well, but things, especially in the UK, are turning around now post-election, and I think that with the US post-election will be the same. But the fact that you started last year and it shows that there's a crescendo there, and this year has been, just as good or maybe even better than last year, shows that you're going against the tide and growing your business. So it's a good outcome for you. I love your niche in terms of being in retail, fashion, and e-commerce. How do you find your candidates? Do they come to you once you advertise, or do you have to do a little bit of search and scout them?
Yeah, look, it's both really. It very much depends on the role. There's certain roles where you might be able to rely on advert response a little bit, but I never just do one or the other. I will always I will always advertise. Not to say, look, maybe that's a lie. I won't always advertise a role just because, things cost money. Like there's limited. So I have 2 job slots on LinkedIn. I have more than 2 jobs at any one time, but I do rotate those job slots. So it just depends. But I'd probably advertise, 80% of the roles. But yeah, it's very much a mixture of. I'd say I find 70% of my candidates through searching, so through mainly LinkedIn, but if you say sort of LinkedIn and my network, I find 70% of candidates through that, maybe even 80%, and then the remainder might come from advertising. So yeah, it's a real mixture. Some of the roles that we recruit for are quite specialised and quite niche, so you can't just rely on people coming through job applications. You've got to really kind of go out and cherry pick those types of people that you want to work that you want to have conversations with. That's mainly using LinkedIn. Sometimes we use Seek, but it's not really, to be honest, I don't find it very good. I think LinkedIn, and then I do have certain people that are probably sick of me calling them that I like. So I have people that are kind of very well networked in, especially kind of e-commerce and sort of fashion and retail. I'm always building that network. I just reach out to people on LinkedIn constantly and just kind of say, hey, I'd love a chat. Do you want to, can I buy you a coffee or this or that? And I'm starting to build that network of people that if I get a role in, especially more of a kind of senior role, I can call them up and say, hey, look, I'm recruiting for this business. They're looking for this. Who do you reckon I should be speaking to? So it's a mixture
and you would
of that
mostly, if you need to start from scratch and do that search to find those 70 to 80% of your candidates, it's LinkedIn that you use if you don't have them in your network.
Yeah, pretty much. I've used, I've used sort of Seek and Indeed before, but it's mainly LinkedIn. But I think that's the nature of the roles I recruit for. They are normally kind of mid to senior, obviously fashion, retail, e-com, but head office stuff. So it's not really so much sort of store based roles. We don't, we do a bit of that. Probably less of that this year. Did more of that last year. You can probably, I'd say that's probably a little bit more even, where maybe 50% of that you get people from advertising, 50% sourcing, just because you generally find people in store are a little less active on LinkedIn. Just generally, not as much as it used to be, but generally speaking, a little bit less active than people who sort of work in support office, head office.
Fair enough. One thing that I've noticed as well is you mentioned that in a post, and I wanted to sort of discuss a little bit more with you, is the transferability of people's skills. Even within the retail sector, if you've been in retail stores, even as a senior executive, a senior manager, which are usually my clientele, they find it hard to transition to e-commerce. Sometimes it's hard because they don't have the experience, but sometimes it's hard because they actually don't like it. So how are you finding the demands of your clients? What is it that clients are prepared to compromise when they're looking for candidates and they can't find the exact fit? You mentioned it's kind of a niche expertise that you're sometimes looking for. Are you always able to find that niche expertise, or do you need those sort of transferable skills to come in and our clients happy with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think most of the time businesses, and whether they're using an agency or direct, but especially when using an agency, I think they want kind of like for like a lot of the time. They want they want somebody who's worked for a similar type of business in a similar sort of role, who've done a similar sort of thing, and that's just because a lot of recruitment is about you want to bring someone into the business who can add incredible value, who can who's got the skill set, but a lot of it is about minimizing risk as well. So the more things that you kind of get aligned that are similar to the role that you're bringing someone in for, then it minimizes that risk. So, for example, if I'm looking for an e-commerce manager for, let me just make up a business, Sass and Bide. So if I'm looking for an e-commerce manager for Sass and Bide, and I can find somebody who's from a similar sized business, a competitor, somebody who specialises in women's wear, it just feels a lot more comfortable to them. They bring a lot of kind of knowledge and expertise into that business. Now, that's not to say they will just look for people from those sort of businesses. But would they look for an e-commerce manager outside of fashion and retail? Probably not, but it depends what the market's like, and I think that's where we kind of advise as recruiters, recruitment agencies. We're constantly in this market. So if somebody comes to me and says, we're looking for this kind of position, this is the sort of experience we need in it, we'll know pretty much straight away if that's going to be realistic or not. So you want to try and manage expectations. Nothing's ever impossible, but it's about understanding what are the non-negotiables, what things can you look past, what things can't you look past. So it might be level. They might not need somebody who's at manager level on 150k. They might be open to somebody who's on that upward curve, or somebody who's a specialist looking to move into that. Will they look at somebody 4 days a week? Will they look at somebody remotely? Will they look at somebody who is even overqualified? I'll always ask that question, because there's lots of people, especially what I find when you get to that kind of senior manager level of, and in retail or those sort of industries, maybe that's kind of 150 to 160, 170, 180. They don't necessarily want to go into those head of or director level positions. They're quite happy just kind of staying at that kind of level. They enjoy it. They don't want the extra pressure and stresses that come with it, but they find it really hard to get those jobs because they're deemed as overqualified, because they've got 20 years experience in the industry doing that kind of thing. So I'll always ask that question and kind of promote that sort of thing, and because I think there's just really great people that get overlooked because they're deemed to be overqualified, flight risks, and I get it. I understand why you might think somebody who's overqualified could be a flight risk, especially if they're out of work at the moment, because what starts going through your head is, okay, are they just looking at this job because they're not working at the moment? As soon as something comes up more at their level, will they just jump ship? Look, it's a valid concern, and I don't blame businesses for thinking like that, but I think as long as you're promoting them to have open conversations, to give the candidate a chance to be able to have that conversation with them, then that's all we can really do.
Yeah, I've been posting about that on LinkedIn recently, and I get some interesting comments, because I've got comments from employers saying, of course I would hire an overqualified person, but I've also had employers actually reaching out to me for consultations on what to do with all of these overqualified people that are applying for jobs. They could have my job, and I don't know how to even let them, I don't know what feedback to give them that I'm not able to choose them. There's so many different ways of thinking about this. I'd say from a career coach point of view, 80% of the time they're applying for a job overqualified because they're just desperate. That's usually what it is. But there are 20% of people out there working with me that just don't want the added pressures and responsibilities. They may even have had a taste of it and they didn't like it. And they're now, and I think it's probably better for the candidate to, would you agree that it's probably better to be upfront about it with a recruiter?
Yeah, definitely. I always promote transparency. And just quickly going back to your point, it's a really hard dynamic, isn't it? Just imagine if you are, that head of department, and there's somebody who's applying for this role or interviewing for this role, which is, reporting into you, who is more experienced than you, who is more, who has kind of done your job before. Are you going to be worried that they're there to sort of step into it, if anything? And these are all natural concerns. But I think, like I said before, I think as long as we're kind of open to talking about these and delving into the reasons why somebody's looking for this role and they're not looking for something more senior, then that's what interviews are for. Finding these things out, and you've got to trust people sometimes. And going back to your point about being open to recruiters, as much as, and I'm speaking specifically about recruitment agencies in this scenario, but look, we're paid by the business, so that's our client. So we're working essentially for them. But from my point of view, I also, I'm also working for the candidate. When I say the candidate, I'm talking about the people that are going into the process that might get that job. I'm not talking every candidate. I can't work for every candidate out there. I can advise, be respectful, get back to people, but I can't kind of proactively work on their behalf. But once it gets to that point where people are in an interview process, I'm working to get the best outcome for everyone, because that's that's my job, and that's also of benefit to me. So the more people are honest with me, I can then help, using my experience, manage that situation. So I might, what I get quite a lot, not quite a lot, but what I've got recently a few times is somebody going through a process where the role might be hybrid, say 1 day a week from home. And the person going through the process, halfway through the process, says to me, or maybe after the first interview, or just before the first interview, will say, oh, look, do you think they'd be open to 2 days from home, or maybe even sort of 3 days sometimes because of this, how flexible are they? Child pickup or this, or do you think they could, have a bit more budget for salary? And I normally say, what I'd normally say in that situation is, it's hard for you to have this conversation with them, or for me to have this conversation with them before you've gone in for interview, because their default's probably going to be no, because they don't know you. They don't know what you can bring to the business. They've got no skin in the game. They've got no commitment to you, because at the moment you're just a name on a CV. So, we're close enough. It's not like they're saying, oh, we don't offer work from home. They do, they're saying it's 1 day a week. It could possibly be 2, but why don't, let's go through this process first, and then at the end, if they are, if there's somebody that you want to offer, that's when we can start negotiate these kind of this middle ground to see if there's any leniency this way or that way. Now, that's not to say we want to put people through a process in a way that they don't fit the bill, and we want to try and sort of move the goalpost last minute. But you kind of use your, I've done this for 20 years, so you when things are a bit more flexible, but you also kind of get to understand when's the best time to bring this up as well. You bring it up at the beginning, you stand less chance of getting what you want compared to if you bring it up at the end. But it depends how close you are to what they're offering. If they're offering 150 and you want 190, then well, no. If they say, oh, look, budget's 150, but you want more 160, I'd say, rather than saying that up front, go through the process, because then they'll be able to see your worth. So when you have that conversation, they can make that decision based on knowledge. They've had 2 interviews, 3 interviews with you. They've understood what you've done in past roles, what you can bring to the business. Now they can sit there and think, well, actually, yeah, how can we increase this to 160? Can we pull budget from elsewhere? How about this other role we're recruiting for? Maybe we can take a little bit of budget from that, because that's, maybe not as much of a key role. So it's about understanding when to when to have those conversations in the process sometimes, and also how realistic are those outcomes going to be. Now, going back to the honesty piece, what I would say, what I mean by that is, then I want that candidate to be completely honest with me, because I'm here to help them, through that process. If I think they can get the job, I want them to get the job as well. Then the more honest they are with me, the better we can handle that situation, rather than going through the process, not having that conversation with me, then right at the end saying, oh, this is actually what I'm going to look for, or this is what I want in terms of flexibility. So yeah, it's always good to be honest. And I think if you're working with a good recruiter, somebody who's experienced, they can kind of help manage you through this sort of minefield of salary negotiations. If you want more flexibility, if you want a 4-day week or 9-day fortnight, or anything like that, they'll know if it's better to approach this subject up front. They'll know if it's better to wait on the back end or somewhere in the middle. Depends how long they've worked with the client, but they probably know them quite well. So I think from my point of view, what I want is complete honesty. Now, it might be different if you're applying for a job directly with that business and you're dealing with their internal HR team. They've probably there's not as much in it for them to. No, sorry, that's wrong. Not saying there's not as much in it for them, but it's a slightly different relationship. It's a slightly different dynamic. They're more so working for that, for that business. They're part of that team. So having those conversations, being completely honest up front might be a bit more difficult. You might have to have this thought process yourself to think, okay, when's best to raise this? When, which is a little bit harder, which is, again, why I would always say to somebody, if you've got the opportunity to go through a recruiter for a position, then I always would do, because I just think you get a lot of expertise and a lot of support that you wouldn't necessarily get, and sort of going through that process, it's daunting, and you don't know when to bring things up. You don't know what you can talk about, what you shouldn't talk about. What do you know? Even things as simple as people seem to struggle when asked, what salary you're looking for, because there's all this advice out there about, oh, don't tell them, or tell them you're doing this, or tell them that, or tell them so just be honest. This is this is roughly what I'm looking for. You give a banding.
I was a little bit worried at the beginning when we started discussing this, because I was afraid your advice would be different from mine, but it's the same. So that's great, because people are not going to be confused if they are listening to the episodes one after the other. You're absolutely right. I think the only concern that the candidate may have is that recruiters are very different from each other. And I mean, this is just something that I would sort of ask you to think about, I mean, you probably already do it anyway, Russell, but is to be upfront about your philosophy and the way that you work with the candidates, maybe on your website, or so that they feel comfortable talking to you, because candidates are so wary of recruiters that never get back to them, that don't seem to be in their, that they don't seem to click with, and they are worried that if they're too honest or say something that they're going to get out of the race. But I agree with you that there are some things that need to be discussed when the employer has already fallen in love with you.
The thing is, I think I get it why job seekers and candidates don't, not necessarily don't trust recruiters, but maybe don't think they have their best interests at heart, or let's say
there's a big range of recruiters out there. Let's just
but it all stems from how recruitment is done. This is where all the issues stem from, right? Because there's too many businesses out there that undervalue recruitment, and I'm looking at this through a lens of a recruitment agency. I'm not looking at this through a lens of businesses that are hiring directly. Even then, they might want to look at what they're targeting their internal teams against. But the problem is, people's mindset and view of recruitment agencies is normally, you don't pay up front, do you? You pay on delivery, so we're not going to pay you until you play somebody with us. A lot of companies want to go to multiple agencies, so they give very little commitment up front. So then recruiters, like the agencies, take a lot of risk. So to minimise that risk, recruiters have to play a bit more of a numbers game. So I can't just work on 2 things. I've got to work on 4 things because I might not fill those 4 things. Now, look, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about the way I do business. I'm talking about the way I know that 70-80% of recruitment agencies across different industries do business, because I've seen it enough to know. So it all stems from there being a lack of respect for what recruitment agencies and recruiters do. There being the case of we're working with this agency, 3-4 agencies, is first past the post. So the quality of care for candidates is going to be poor because they haven't got the time to give candidates good care. They don't care about the process, because all they want to do is place somebody in that role. And then it becomes a numbers game, because they might think, well, I place 1 in 3 roles because I always work on a contingent basis. I always, it's normally multi-agency. I'm up against other agencies when I work as well. So again, they think, well, I need 10 jobs to fill 3. And then what they're doing is looking at their job list and thinking, right, these are my most fillable jobs. So then they're focusing on that. So both the candidates and clients of perhaps the other jobs don't, get very little care at all. It just becomes a numbers game. You start viewing candidates as numbers, jobs as numbers, and then the service levels are poor, and this is kind of this vicious circle. Then the businesses will then think, well, recruitment's rubbish. We don't really trust him. We need to use more agencies because we're not getting the results we want. Whereas if there's more of a partnered approach where companies even paid up front, I'm not talking about doing retained search for everything, but even if there is part of that risk taken by the businesses when they're engaging a recruitment agency, half of that fee up front, to actually acknowledge that the work that we do as recruitment agencies isn't just about that one person that finds a job. It's everything that goes in between that. It's a search that we do, it's a shortlist that we present, it's the feedback we give you and what the market's saying about your business, about the role. All of these things. If I don't place that candidate, all those things you're kind of getting for free, and you're kind of saying you don't value. All you're valuing is one person sitting on that chair. Yeah, of course that's the goal, but this is a whole process. It's I always think of it an example like using an accountant. You wouldn't go to 5 different accountants and say, right, I want you to do my taxes, but whoever does it the quickest and saves me the most money, that's anyone I'm going to pay. I'm pretty sure I know what they'd tell you to do. And it'd probably start with F and end with F as well. So why do people do this with recruitment agencies? Why do they just think recruitment agencies are going to run around doing loads of work? And the thing is, you will end up, you'll end up filling the job because you use enough agencies. They're spam email enough people on their database, ignore the rest, ignore loads of people in the process. And you will get a CV and you'll end up recruiting somebody, but at what cost? At what cost to your brand? At what cost to the people that have actually been in that process or been reached out to and then ignored about that process? So, it will come at a cost. And will it be the most engaged candidate, the best candidate for your business? Probably not, because the agency's not been allowed to take the time to really vet the candidate. They might have overlooked a couple of things that they had, slight red flags about, because they thought, well, now they'd probably get the job because they've come in from these businesses. They seem like a really good candidate, so I'll just take a chance. And because if I don't send them, somebody else will, won't they? So it all becomes very tangled, very messy, and poor. So probably rambled a bit there, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
No, I think that for the listeners for this show, who are usually people seeking jobs, it's really important to understand the recruitment and selection process from the point of view of the recruiter. Absolutely essential part of this, because otherwise, job searching is such a lonely process, you're by yourself most of the time. Most people don't hire coaches to help them, don't have outplacement support. So it's a guessing game. They're guessing, what's going on, and they don't have a lot of know-how and knowledge about the recruitment process. So this conversation is fantastic because I think people need to understand that they are not the client, that the client is the employer, that the recruiter is being paid by the employer, that the recruiter has different goals and needs and KPIs than you have, and you don't need to take everything so personally as well. And finding great recruiters, and like you said, applying to jobs through recruiters is actually optimizing your job search, because if you don't get a job with that recruiter for the first time, if you left a good impression, that recruiter may come back to you, as you said before, that you go to people time and time again to invite them to apply for roles because you've engaged with them. Yeah, that if you're applying in-house, there's less of a chance of that happening, right? So
probably just because they're going to probably get more volume. I don't know. It's hard to say that with any certainty, but I think, look, recruiters are not stupid. We know candidates we can trust, and we know candidates we can't. And if all I'd say as a candidate is just be responsive. If a recruiter calls you, get back to them when as soon as you can. Get back to them. I'm not saying call back. Drop everything, call back, but don't leave it 2 days. Because that says to me, okay, you're not very responsive. Where's the interest? Is this what you're going to be like during the process? And look, you're not going to rule somebody out just for that, but you see common signs. Now, I always see something where I reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, they get back to me quite quickly. We line up a call, might be the next day. Let me tell you about the role. Blah blah blah. We have a good conversation. Okay, great. I'm going to put your details forward. Put them forward. They go for an interview. They might call me afterwards, and then I reach out to them because they're invited for a second interview, and then it takes them over a day to get back to me on LinkedIn or on text message. And okay, well, can you talk? Well, yeah, I can't. Well, I can't talk today or tomorrow. I can talk on Friday though. And things start to slow down, and where they and it's a consistency. Now, some people might always take 2 days to get back to you, and then you get to learn that, and that's just them. But when somebody goes from getting back to you really quickly and then it slows down, 99% of the time it's because they're losing interest in the position. And I've even got an example at the moment where I'm trying to get hold of somebody who's for a second interview who is unresponsive. So I'm being ghosted, and it happens. We get ghosted a lot as well. So I do try and mitigate this. I always say up front to every single candidate when they enter the process, I say to them, look, there's a good chance you're going to go through this process and at some point either get cold feet or just figure out, this job is just not for me. And I said, that is absolutely fine. I actually encourage that, because I'd rather you pull out the process before an offer rather than kind of 2 or 3 months into the offer, because then people have invested time, a lot of time and money then. So I said, never be afraid to talk to me about it. If you've got cold feet, never be afraid to drop out the process. All I ask is that you just tell me and communicate with me, because my relationship with the client is very important to me. So I do try and sort of mitigate this, and it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. But through that honesty, I had a situation just very recently where somebody went for a role, and after the first interview, she called up and she goes, Russell, you're not going to like what I've got to say. I don't think this role's right for me. I'd like to pull out. And I was like, look, that's absolutely fine. This is after a first video interview. So I said, look, that's absolutely fine. I said, look, what's changed? Because when we first spoke about the role, you were really excited about it, because of this, this and this. So I just want to understand, since, and even after your video interview, you the text message you sent me was, oh, wow, the role sounds amazing. I'm so excited. What has changed? And she talked, well, I won't go into specifics, but she talked me through it. And it seemed to me that, she didn't feel like the challenge was necessarily there. She wasn't really sure. there was a bit of uncertainty, and I said, look, that's absolutely fine, but it seems to me that you just haven't got enough information to be able to make a decision right now. It's not that you're kind of interested or not interested. It's that you've got quite a few questions. So, wouldn't it make sense to go to the in-person interview? Actually get to meet them. I said, it's good you're having these doubts, because the interview is now going to give you the opportunity to raise these doubts, ask them in a way that you can kind of get to the bottom of these, these doubts via questions to the business, find out more about the role and these things that are important to you. I just said, look, I'm not here to push you into it. If you don't want to go, honestly, no, I've loved working with you. We'll work together again. But I do actually recommend you go. And she was like, yeah, do you know what, you're right. I'm glad I spoke to you. And she got the job, just accepted it and signed the contract. But the point of that is that, I'm not trying to kind of gloat about how great I am, although I am pretty great. But the point of that is that she might not have had that conversation if up front I didn't say to her, look, whatever happens, just talk to me. Just talk to me. I'm not going to push you. Because I think, again, people might feel like recruiters want to try and push them into something or not, because they've got an ulterior motive. So I think just trying to keep that level of openness and transparency, I genuinely believe it always works out for everyone. But
I think you did well.
Some recruiters, they're not bad people, but some recruiters are just, and look, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I've worked for recruitment businesses back in the UK, an agency where the sort of targets that you're working to, as in speculative CVs sent out or CVs sent out, the number of interviews you're arranging, all of these metrics that you're targeted against don't encourage good behaviour. They encourage volume, they encourage, placements, which essentially the businesses want, but they don't encourage, client experience. They don't encourage a high level of candidate experience. Yeah, of course, a better client experience, a candidate experience you give you probably more likely to do a better job. But what, some of these targets that agencies still work to nowadays, which is, CV sent out and all of this, don't encourage great behaviour. So the recruiters are just doing what the businesses are telling them to do. So when it comes to that, communicating with candidates who are maybe, unsuccessful or not going to be right for that role, that's not a priority to them. Getting back to a candidate that they might have had a telephone screen with, and then they've spoken to 10 people for a telephone screen, and they're going to put 4 people forward for the role. Their priority, because of what they're targeted against, is not to then go and communicate to those 6 other people they've not put forward. Is to then go and find the next 4 people to put forward for that next job, and then the next job and next job. Because remember, they're working contingency, multi-agency, so they've got to work on 10 jobs at a time just to fill 2 or 3. So they haven't got time to deal with these people that aren't right for this role. They just haven't got time, and it's not a priority to them. Whereas if you work on just 3 roles and you're either retained or working exclusively or however it may be, where you know that you're going to fill those 3 roles unless something drastic happens, like they just pull the role or whatever it may be, the 5% chance. Now, I will still put those 4 people forward, but I've got more time now to go back to those 6 people. And even if it's an email, it doesn't need to be a call. Even if it's an email saying, hey, look, thanks for your chat so much. Really enjoyed it. There were stronger candidates we were putting forward for the role. That doesn't mean that we're not, there won't be anything suitable in the future. Wherever it is, you get the gist. Mm-hmm. But you have more time now to give a better candidate experience and to get back to these people that, are just not right for something right now. So, it just confuses me.
I think you're doing a great job. I really like your point about giving it a go unless you're absolutely 100% sure that the job is not for you. Usually, when I'm working with clients, it's usually something red flags, from in regards to leadership style or culture or feedback received. I, as a candidate, received feedback from my network saying, don't work for this person or something like that really made me pull out. However, sometimes what happens in our brain, we self-select ourselves out of a race. We argue, we think we're being so objective and rational, when in fact it's just some sort of scary thoughts or just feeling that you're not ready for the role or something like that. I also, in fact, in retail, have felt that some candidates that have extensive retail experience, but then they apply or contacted for a role selling something that they're not confident about, like, I don't know, if you're woman and it's power tools. And then you're like, oh no, that's not for me. And then you go through the interview and you fall in love with the business and the company and all of that. But this client of mine had self-selected out of the race because she just didn't feel like she could be a great marketing person for something she didn't know much about.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I get it even with, like, I reach out to a guy for, you know, an e-commerce role for a women's fashion brand, and I'll often get, oh yeah, I don't think it's the right brand for me, and like, what, you know, look at the opportunity. Don't forget what the product is. And I've always thought, like, so when I started off in agency back in like 2004, I did buying and merchandising, so it's always that product related. And you know, something that I've never really understood is people that got so attached to a kind of product area. You know, you don't have to be a customer to be great at, you know, to be great as a buyer for that role. You know, I could be a beauty buyer. You know, I don't have to wear makeup to be able to buy that area. You know, there's so many skills and so many you know, kind of experiences that you can have that's going to make you great at that role regardless of product. Now, of course there's an argument to being, you know, really sort of niche, and you know, you might have always worked in lingerie and you just know that technical area inside out, but there's so many, you know, products, 60-70% of sort of products out there when it comes to retail. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to be a wearer of that product. You know, you don't have to be a customer of that businesses, but there's so many candidates out there that want to be, you know, they want to be a customer of the brand they work for, and, you know, be somebody who wears that product as well. There's also businesses that want that, you know, and I won't say who because there's some I work with, but there's businesses that want the person they hire to be a customer, to look like their customer, right? And to you know, to be someone who would shop there. And think about how much that narrows that talent pool down by. So there's some businesses you can imagine, maybe some of the sort of higher end, you know, brands, often like the women's fashion brands, who have this mindset of they want everyone to be that customer, you know, to everyone
That's
to be,
true.
you know, to look like that, you know, that brand ambassador almost. And and they would probably sacrifice certain skill sets to get that as well. So look, businesses can recruit who they want. You know, we're here ultimately, or I am here, I should say, I don't want to speak for other agencies. I'm here to kind of just say, you know, to advise people to say, look, the problem with that might be this, or have you looked at that? Have you considered this? You know, maybe you could, you know, you'd open your talent pool if you looked at this. You know, companies that don't offer any sort of work from home, you know, they don't need me to say to them, this severely restricts your talent pool. Do you know? You know, they know that.
Russell, you're from England. Do you know that show where people are buying houses in the countryside, and then they see two houses that meet their criteria, and then like a really odd house that's completely out of the box? Is that how you present candidates to your clients as well? Do you usually send a client that's a little bit outside of the assignment, so that they have a little bit of a shock and awe and
do you know what?
in the market?
And again, this is when it comes down to kind of understanding your client. So some clients, I wouldn't do that just because I know they just wouldn't be interested. And ultimately, I'm a business. I don't want to send people they don't want to see. But I'm working with a client at this moment in time where what they're recruiting for is an e-commerce manager, but their budget is quite wide. You know, they you know, there's kind of like, look, we look anywhere between kind of 140 and 180, 190 here, and it's a new position to them as well. And they'd look at kind of, you know, relocation or bringing somebody from even abroad or interstate, and because it's a new role to them. They haven't got like this blueprint or this expectation of this person has to be this and has to be that, and, you know, which is nice. It's quite refreshing. So I've actually given them kind of, you know, I've given them 5 people that they're interviewing, and kind of almost like, you know, one at 140, 150, 160, you know, not purposefully, but I wanted to give them a kind of, you know, diverse selection. And then, you know, somebody who is, you know, kind of really established, you know, got this really strong experience, and other people that are kind of more, you know, more up and coming, more people that are kind of, you know, newer to the industry or less, you know, a bit less experienced, but have maybe more of an alignment with that brand, because it's a very kind of specific brand. It's a brand targeted at a very kind of, you know, specific type of customer. So trying to give them somebody that fits that profile, but maybe less experienced. And and so far the problem is, so far they've loved everyone. It's
good problem to have.
But I think for them it's one of those things where they know what they want, but they won't maybe 70-80%, but they won't know that kind of final 20% until they've talked to different types of people and thought, oh, okay, so somebody with this experience could give us this, but somebody with that experience could bring this, but do we need that right now? Actually, maybe that's something we need in 4 or 5 years time when we've grown a little bit more. So it just gives them I think it just helps them with that decision making process. It's not to say the candidates are like sacrificial lambs to help them make a decision on who they want to then go out to market again, but it's about helping them see the different types of candidates that they can attract, and then help them kind of work out what's important to them. Because sometimes you think you know what's important to you, but sometimes that just changes. Again, like looking at a house, you might think, there might be things like needs to have 5 bedrooms and this and this. Then there's those things that are sort of preferences, but then you end up going for this house that's completely different. You might think, I want a modern house, but then you see this old sandstone built house in the middle of the country, and it's all like low ceilings and beams everywhere, and you just fall in love with it because it's got character. That can happen with with job seekers and candidates as well. Somebody might walk into that interview who on paper they don't necessarily tick every box, but obviously they tick enough boxes to be seen, and they just come in and they just have something about them. They just think you just think, well, you're going to be great for us. I love your energy. Yeah, there might be a couple of areas that we need to train you a bit more on, but you bring so much more in terms of, these other areas that we hadn't really thought of much, but now we see them in you, we love it. So, that can always happen in interview. That's why I always encourage companies, you don't want them to see loads of people for the sake of seeing loads of people, but don't be, if there's somebody you're on the fence about, just have a video call with them. Just have a telephone call. Just speak to them. Just give them a chance, and just see how you feel after that. So I think
Awesome, Russell. You know what? I could keep talking to you all afternoon. You have so much to say. I think we need you back on the podcast. Maybe next year we'll have another chat when you changed your name and expanded your area of expertise beyond retail, fashion, and e-commerce jobs. I'd love to see how that goes for you. I loved having you here. I think that this is a podcast that I'm going to recommend all of my clients to listen to for that perspective on how recruiters think, how they work, how they operate, what makes them tick, why they do things the way they do. Not just because you've explained not just how you worked, but you also explained how recruiters worked in general, and you differentiated yourself at times, but sometimes it's like that's us. So thank you so much for the generosity of coming on the show and talking to us. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We need to keep in touch.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.